Father Pio looked at the altar, took a deep breath, and said something no one wanted to hear. The time will come when the church will be tested as never before, and many will lose their faith. People exchanged glances, some doubted, others laughed. But what he said back then seemed like just a distant warning, until now. Today, what seemed impossible is beginning to become visible. Empty churches, faith in crisis, values being exchanged for convenience, and a strange feeling that the sacred is being silenced little by little. The most frightening thing is realizing that everything he announced is happening before our eyes, and almost no one talks about it. Father Pio didn't speak of fear, he spoke of preparation. He said that true persecution would not only come from the outside, but from within, when hearts became accustomed to error and called darkness light. And if you pay attention, that's exactly what we're experiencing. Distorted messages, suppressed truths, a faith that seems to weaken with each generation. He warned that the enemy would present himself disguised as a friend, and that the deception would be so subtle that even the most devout could be confused. This prophecy, which many ignored, was a call to awaken, not to fear. Padre Pio wanted people to prepare themselves spiritually, to return to prayer, to truth, and to humility. He knew that a time would come when defending what is right would be seen as wrong, and that spiritual persecution would be silent, but profound. Today, this message rings more alive than ever, and perhaps by reliving his words, we can understand what he truly meant when he said, "The church will be wounded, but not destroyed, because from suffering will be born the purity that the world has forgotten." And it is precisely here that our story begins, with the prophecy that no one wanted to hear, but which now is being fulfilled. Few know, but Padre Pio lived through one of the most painful periods of his life, not because of the visible wounds on his body, but because of the silence imposed upon him. He, the friar who drew crowds with his confessions and miracles, was suddenly forbidden from celebrating Mass in public, prevented from attending to the faithful, and even watched within his own convent. Imagine the pain of a man who dedicated his entire life to God, being silenced by the very church he loved so much. And yet, he did not rebel. He accepted everything with humility, saying only, "If it is God's will, so be it." But deep down, he knew something much greater lay behind that silence. Father Pio understood that what was happening to him was only the beginning of a purification. He would say to those closest to him, "They want to silence the voice that awakens souls." And when he said this, he wasn't referring only to himself, but to something that would come in the future, a time when the voices of truth would be stifled, censored, and discredited. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? We live in days when those who defend the faith are ridiculed, those who speak of God are treated as fanatics, and those who try to preserve values are attacked. It's as if the world has turned upside down. What's most striking is that he had already predicted all of this. Padre Pio said that the church would go through a time of spiritual darkness, where even within it there would be confusion and distrust. Today, many see this prophecy being fulfilled before their eyes. Internal divisions, scandals, leaders lost between politics and faith. The silence he lived was a harbinger of what we are experiencing now, a world trying to silence the divine. And even amidst all of this, Padre Pio never lost hope. He used to say, "The devil fears faith more than words." His example is a reminder that when the world tries to silence the truth, it's time to pray louder, believe more deeply, and stand firm, because the silence of a saint can echo for centuries. Father Pio used to say that the greatest pain for the church would not come from outside, but from within. He warned that the time would come when God's people would be divided, not by wars or political ideologies, but by spiritual confusion. And these words, spoken so many decades ago, seem to describe exactly what we see today. Instead of unity, there is discord. Instead of living faith, there are arguments about who is right or wrong. Father Pio called this the prophecy of division, a moment when the enemy would no longer need to attack from the outside, because the very body of faith would be fragmenting on its own. He used to say, "The time will come when wolves will wear sheep's clothing." This frightening metaphor meant that evil would disguise itself as goodness, that people and ideas contrary to the truth would infiltrate the heart of faith, pretending to represent the light. And if we look closely, this confusion is everywhere. Distorted messages, interpretations that distance us from the sacred, opinions that place man above God. Padre Pio saw in this a great danger, the risk of the faithful getting lost by following those who speak beautifully but do not live the gospel. He believed that this division would be one of humanity's hardest trials. He said that faith would be tested not by physical persecution, but by deception disguised as truth. Many would fall because they would seek the easiest path, and few would remain steadfast in what is truly divine. It is painful to realize how this is already happening. Each person creating their own version of God, forgetting the simplicity of love, prayer, and humility. But Padre Pio also left a glimmer of hope. Even amidst the confusion, the Holy Spirit will guide sincere hearts. He believed that the truth would not disappear, only become more difficult to see. And it is precisely in this time of division that each of us must decide whether we will be part of the noise or the light. One night in 1959, Padre Pio woke up startled. He had had such a vivid dream that he couldn't fall back asleep. The next day, he told some friars what he had seen, a huge church in flames. The fire wasn't coming from outside, but from within. The walls trembled, the altar collapsed, and priests ran in despair, trying to extinguish something that couldn't be extinguished. He said in a trembling voice, "These flames are not of the world. They are from within. It is the fire of confusion and loss of faith." At that moment, few understood. But today, looking at everything that happens in the church and in the world, it's impossible not to shudder. Father Pio spoke sadly of a time when spiritual fire would turn into destruction, when the flame of faith would be replaced by the flame of vanity, and pride would corrode what was once sacred. He saw this fire as a symbol of the coming crisis, a crisis not of buildings or structures, but of souls. He said, "The stones of the church will remain, but many hearts that should be living temples will be extinguished." It was as if he foresaw that the true fire would be invisible, burning within people, weakening faith, trust, and love for God. What is most striking is that decades later, we see a different flame consuming spirituality, the fire of controversies, scandals, and divisions. The same fire he saw in his dream seems to be spreading throughout the world, not with real flames, but with coldness, indifference, and distrust. And even so, Padre Pio never lost hope. He said that God would allow the fire to purify, not to destroy, that from the ashes a stronger, simpler, and truer faith would be reborn. And perhaps the dream that frightened him that morning was not a vision of the end, but a warning of a new beginning, a new chance to rekindle the fire of divine love within every heart. Father Pio always warned that the greatest danger would not come from outside, but from deception disguised as light. He said, "The devil will not appear with horns and a trident, but with sweet words and an appearance of goodness." And this phrase, which seems symbolic, sounds frighteningly real today. We live in a time when evil disguises itself as virtue and error is presented as freedom. Father Pio called this the trap of false brilliance, when the enemy pretends to be good, deceiving even sincere hearts. He explained that the devil is cunning and knows that fear drives people away, but false comfort draws them closer. Therefore, he doesn't destroy faith directly. He dilutes it, little by little. He makes people believe they no longer need to pray, that there is no right or wrong, that everything is relative. And gradually, the flame of the soul is extinguished without anyone noticing. Padre Pio said that this would be the most dangerous blow of all, the silent attack on people's hearts. Today, one only needs to look around to see how this warning is being fulfilled. Many live seeking only pleasure, fame, success, but forget inner peace. There is a thirst for glamour, but not for light. Padre Pio saw in this the perfect disguise for evil, something that seems good, but distances us from what is eternal. He said, "When man puts himself at the center, the enemy wins." But even in the face of this disguised deception, he also left us a way out. The true light, according to him, is simple, humble, and silent. It doesn't shout, it doesn't shine ostentatiously, it simply illuminates the right path. Padre Pio taught that when the world seems confusing, we should return to prayer and purity of heart, because only those who learn to recognize false brilliance are able to see the true light. And it is this light that he so wanted humanity not to lose. Father Pio used to say that the churches will be empty, but hell will be full. At first glance, it seemed like a harsh, even exaggerated statement, but looking at the world today, it's impossible not to feel the echo of those words. Churches once full, now silent. Empty pews, extinguished candles, distant hearts. Father Pio wasn't just talking about walls and altars, he was talking about the spiritual emptiness that would take over people. The emptiness of those who have stopped believing, who have traded prayer for weariness, the sacred for distraction. He said that modern man would turn away from God, not out of hatred, but out of indifference. And this would be the most dangerous form of darkness. Not the kind that destroys suddenly, but the kind that gradually extinguishes the light of faith. For him, the weakening of spiritual life would be a sign of a distracted humanity, too preoccupied with the world to hear the divine voice. And this, according to him, would pave the way for a silent persecution, one in which the enemy does not forbid churches, but simply makes people stop going. The most curious thing is that, without realizing it, the world has moved in exactly that direction. Many say they don't have time to pray. Others claim they don't need faith. Padre Pio saw this as the result of a gradual distancing from grace, a distancing that began at home within the heart. But he also spoke of hope. He said that when the church is emptied, God would call the faithful back in a stronger way, through pain, longing, and the need for consolation. Because even when the temples are empty, God's love abandons no one. Padre Pio believed that the silence of the churches would be temporary, a time of purification, until humanity rediscovered the true value of faith. And perhaps today, that call is echoing again, inviting each of us to rekindle the flame that should never have been extinguished. Padre Pio used to warn that the greatest enemy of faith would not be persecution, but relativism, that dangerous way of thinking where everything is acceptable, where there is no longer right and wrong. He firmly stated, "Modern man wants a Christ without a cross and a church without sacrifice." And if we look around, it seems exactly what is happening. People want the comfort of faith, but not the commitment. They want the miracle, but not the change. They want heaven, but they don't want to climb the ladder of humility. Father Pio saw this as a spiritual trap. He explained that evil would subtly infiltrate, making error seem modern and truth seem outdated. And so, little by little, people would begin to mold faith according to their own interests, transforming the gospel into something convenient. He said, "Times will come when hearts will seek the pleasure of the moment, forgetting the eternal value of the soul." This, for him, was the most dangerous persecution, the one that begins within the heart when a person decides to follow their own desires instead of God's will. And it's not hard to see this happening. Many no longer believe in sin, in punishment, nor in forgiveness, a faith without demands, a love without commitment, a spirituality without roots has been created. Padre Pio saw this path as a slow slide towards confusion, where truth would be drowned out by the voices of the world. But he also offered a solution, returning to the simplicity of faith. Praying, confessing, forgiving, helping. Simple things, but powerful. He said that the true strength of a Christian lies in remaining faithful, even when the whole world changes direction. And perhaps that is the greatest challenge of our times, keeping the faith alive amidst the noise of lies. Padre Pio believed that whoever could do this would be the flame that would rekindle the light of truth in the world. Padre Pio bore the wounds of Christ on his body, and many thought it was merely a physical sign, an impressive miracle. But he always said there was something much deeper behind those wounds. For him, each mark was a message, a silent warning about the suffering of the church itself. These wounds are not just mine, he would say. They belong to the faith that is being wounded by the world. And in a way, he was right. His pain became a mirror of the spiritual pain that today afflicts millions of people who have lost their sense of the sacred. Padre Pio believed that God had allowed him to feel in his own body the weight of human sins and indifference. The wounds of the Savior, renewed on his body, were a living reminder that true faith demands sacrifice, surrender, and unconditional love. He endured everything in silence, often weeping in prayer, but without complaining. If Jesus suffered for me, why shouldn't I endure a little for him, he would say. Serenely, he was a living example of obedience, faith, and courage. Today, looking back at history, it's impossible not to see how his wounds represented something beyond physical suffering. They symbolized what happens when faith is forgotten, when God's love is exchanged for human interests. Padre Pio saw in his pain a way to save souls, and he asked that each person also carry their own small cross with love, transforming pain into prayer. He believed that every tear shed for love of God had the power to heal the world. Suffering is the fire that purifies the heart, he said. And perhaps that is what his life still teaches us, that suffering, when lived with faith, does not destroy, it transforms. Padre Pio endured pain that many could not bear, but he made it a bridge between heaven and earth, proving that even pain can be a way to love deeply. For many years, some of Padre Pio's most powerful revelations remained silent, hidden in letters exchanged with his spiritual advisor, Padre Agostino. In these letters, written in trembling handwriting marked by tears, he left warnings about the future of the church and humanity. In one of them, Padre Pio wrote something that still chills those who read it today. The church will be judged, and many of its ministers will stray from the truth. These words were not criticisms, but a warning full of pain and love, coming from someone who saw beyond time. For decades, these letters remained guarded, protected by the superiors of the Capuchin order. Only after his death did some of these writings come to light, revealing the depth of his views. He spoke of a period of confusion in which the sacred would be trivialized, and many, even within the church itself, would cease to defend the truth out of fear, convenience, or power. Times will come when speaking of God will be dangerous, he wrote. And if we look around, we realize how frighteningly relevant this sounds today. Father Pio knew that evil would not only attack from the outside, but would try to infiltrate from within, disguised as modernity and good intentions. He said that the human heart is the true battlefield, and that every soul that allows itself to be deceived opens space for the shadow to grow. Even so, his letters did not end in despair, but with hope. The Holy Spirit will never abandon those who remain faithful, he affirmed with confidence. These words today seem like a direct reminder to us. Padre Pio wanted people to Understand that faith does not depend on institutions, but on the inner strength of each individual. He believed that even when everything seems lost, God will always raise up simple people to restore what has been corrupted. His letters were not written to frighten, but to awaken, to remind us that the truth, even when silenced for a time, always finds a way to resurface. Padre Pio spoke with deep sadness about a time he called the dark night of faith. It was a time when people would feel that God was distant, as if the sky had closed and the world plunged into silence. The time will come when the sun of faith will hide, but it will not cease to exist, he said. This seemingly poetic phrase carried a harsh truth. There would be a moment when humanity would feel alone, confused, and spiritually lost. And if we look closely, perhaps we are already living through that time. How many times today do we see people saying they no longer feel faith, that they pray but receive no answer? Padre Pio explained that this absence is not punishment, it is a test. Just as night precedes dawn, God's silence comes before renewal. He believed that faith is only true when it withstands darkness, when it remains firm even without seeing the light. He who remains faithful in the dark, he said, is he who truly knows the love of God. During this spiritual night, Padre Pio said that many would turn away from prayer because they didn't see results, but that this would be the biggest mistake. It is precisely when you think God is far away that he is closest, he taught. He compared the soul to a candle lit in the midst of a storm. Even small, its light overcomes the darkness. And this message applies to all of us. In moments when everything seems to crumble, when faith seems weak and the heart empty, it is there that the true encounter with God can happen. Padre Pio believed that the dark night of faith is not a punishment, but an invitation, a call to trust without seeing, to love without demanding, and to keep walking even without understanding, because in the end, the night always ends. And those who cross the darkness with faith discover that God's light never went out. It was just waiting for the right moment to shine again. Father Pio said that persecution against the faith would not come only with swords or laws, but with something much more subtle, forced silence. He warned that the time would come when those who spoke the truth would be censored, criticized, and even ridiculed. The world will accept all voices except that of those who speak of God, he said sadly. Today, observing what is happening, his words echo the present. Priests are being silenced, Christian messages are being treated as intolerance, and people are afraid to express their faith. The persecution he predicted has already begun, and it is colder and more disguised than any war. He knew this would happen because he saw how much evil infiltrated small things. Discouragement, distraction, and the inversion of values. Padre Pio said that the enemy doesn't need to destroy the church from the outside. It's enough to extinguish the courage of those who defend it. And that's exactly what we see. A generation that often fears being judged for believing, that prefers to remain silent so as not to be criticized. He warned, "The devil does not fear those who ignore him, but those who unmask him." This phrase was a call to courage. Padre Pio believed that a true Christian should not hide, even when the world rejects him. He said that each of us is a small light in the midst of the storm, and that if we stop shining, darkness wins. And the most beautiful thing is that he never spoke with anger or fear. He spoke with love, asking people not to give up on goodness. Even facing persecution within the church itself, he remained steadfast. He never retaliated with hatred, only with prayer. Prayer is the best weapon against any injustice, he taught. And perhaps that is the secret to resisting persecution today, not responding with fury, but with faith. Because evil fears the heart that does not allow itself to be hardened. Padre Pio showed that being faithful, even under attack, is the greatest testimony of love that one can give to God. Father Pio said that persecution would not be the end of the church, but the beginning of a great purification. He compared this difficult time to a spiritual fire that, although painful, would have the power to cleanse everything that was corrupted. God allows his church to be tested so that pure love may be reborn from it, he affirmed firmly. For him, suffering was never punishment, but a path of renewal. Just as gold is purified by fire, faith, according to Father Pio, also needed to be tested to shine again with strength and truth. He believed that the world would drift so far from God that a time of suffering would be necessary for people to see what is essential again. When man forgets the Creator, suffering reminds him of where he came from, he said. It's as if God, in his infinite mercy, allows certain trials not to destroy, but to awaken sleeping hearts. And perhaps that is exactly what we are experiencing today, a time of awakening. Padre Pio saw purification as an opportunity, not an end. He said that from this period of pain, a new generation of faithful would emerge, more humble, more loving, and more aware of the divine presence. After the storm, the sky will be clearer, he would say serenely. He knew that every great transformation requires sacrifice, and that faith must pass through the fire of doubt to become unshakable. Even in the face of so much suffering, Padre Pio never lost hope. On the contrary, he believed that the tears shed today would be the seeds of future joy. The darkness will pass, and the love of Christ will shine again, he would say with conviction. This was the essence of his message. Purification is not destruction, it is rebirth. And when the world understands this, it will realize that what seemed like pain was, in fact, the beginning of a new light, the light that comes after the fire. Father Pio used to say, "Pray, suffer, and remain faithful. The church will not fall, but will be purified." These simple and direct words summarized his entire mission. He knew that the world would face difficult times, times when evil would try to extinguish faith, when many would lose hope, and when the love of God would be mistaken for weakness. But he also believed in something even greater, that in the end, truth would always prevail. Father Pio called this the victory of steadfast hearts, those who, even in the midst of the storm, refuse to abandon the light. He explained that true strength lies not in who shouts the loudest, but in who maintains faith when all seems lost. Those who pray endure, those who trust win, he said. Padre Pio saw the suffering of the world as part of a grand divine plan, a process of spiritual cleansing that would bring something new. Persecution, crises, silence, all of this for him was God's way of preparing humanity for a new beginning. A time when people would once again love sincerely, believe purely, and live humbly. He believed that the storm would not come to destroy the church, but to remove everything that weakened it. Just as a strong wind tears the dry leaves from a tree so that new ones may grow, the purification would come to revive true faith. And that is why Padre Pio always repeated, "Do not be afraid of what is to come. Be afraid only of losing your faith." Today, his words resonate more vividly than ever. They remind us that even when the world seems to crumble, God's love remains steadfast. Persecution, pain, and doubt are merely phases. The end is not chaos, but renewal. Padre Pio invites us to stand firm, with hearts ablaze, ready for the new dawn that comes after the darkness. If Padre Pio's words touched your heart, leave a comment and share what you felt. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel to continue receiving messages that strengthen faith, comfort the soul, and keep alive the light that the world so desperately needs.
Hear the true prophetic message.